So I'm just going to be really brief because the last part of the agenda today was to give all of you an opportunity to talk to each other, particularly around your neighborhood clusters, about some of the things that you could do at the neighborhood scale. So I think one of the challenges that we face is that when you think about, 7 feet of snow falling on Nick's house, there's really nothing that Nick or his neighbors could have done necessarily to make that snow not fall, right? I mean, Christy, I think about you, like when my daughter used to have a snow day, she's old enough now, she just hangs out at home, plays with her phone, but when she was little, like, I have to go to work, but you feel so powerless in the face of some of these big climate forces. There's, leaves you scratching your head about what exactly you can do. And so I guess the message for today is that even though, we're not going to be able to change the weather, change the climate, we can change the way we respond to it. And that's what the conversations we want to have in the community workshops will be. So today's little roundtable sessions are sort of a practice opportunity for when we go to the community workshops next month. What I'm going to do is just show some images. This is not a collection of things we should do. These are things you could do. Only to get kind of people thinking about it, because when you say, what can we do at the neighborhood scale, I think it helps to put some ideas out there to begin the conversation. So not all of these things will make sense for some of the neighborhoods, and I'm assuming that the neighbors, the people who come to the workshops, will have their own ideas. But really anything that improves the stability, the health, the well-being, the quality of life in neighborhoods is a beneficial thing in terms of an adaptation strategy for climate change. So let's talk, we'll start with a challenge and talk about the things maybe at the neighborhood scale that could be done. So for higher utility bills, for the increasing energy costs that a lot of people have been experiencing and are likely to continue to experience, what are the things we can do? We know what the challenges are. We know that people are spending more money cooling their house in the summer, and especially in these weird winters, spending more money on heat in the winter. That gives less money for other things we need to spend money on. And also it's uncomfortable, more than uncomfortable, unsafe conditions if people aren't heating their house because they can't afford to pay the bill. So among the things that we can do, there are things that we already have. So part of this process is about making sure people in the neighborhoods are aware of the programs that exist. The Home Weatherization Assistance Program is an existing program. It has income restrictions, so it's not available to everyone. But for people below a certain income level, there is assistance in terms of weatherizing a house, which would reduce heating bills and make people's houses more comfortable year-round. There's also a program for seniors. So making sure people are aware of those kinds of tools and resources available and take advantage of them, to the greatest extent possible. But there's lots of things that can be done, really technical things. This is the WhatsApp program from Wisconsin, but it's a technological approach where you can plug in this device and see what all of your appliances are doing. Sometimes when we get our heating bill or we get our electric bill, we don't know. In January, why. It's because you've been running the furnace. But, is it an old refrigerator that is an energy hog? This kind of controlling device is just a way of being able to see what all the things in your house are doing and how much energy they are using. Because knowledge is power, right? And if we're trying to reduce our energy use and our energy costs, this is one tool for doing it. Kind of even taking beyond that is, when we have a lot of people using power at the same time, we sometimes get power outages. This was that extreme example. Gosh, it was 10, 11 years ago when the whole eastern seaboard went out. This Cleveland skyline that night, kind of dramatic, kind of beautiful, but weird. Our power outage lasted for some people for several days, but in the wake of Hurricane Sandy, some people were without power for weeks. Certainly after the hurricanes in New Orleans, people were without power for extended periods of time. So the challenges you face with power outages, you have loss of heating and cooling, safety issues, loss of emergency services, and really challenging concerns for people who have chronic illnesses and are elderly, because if you don't have energy, the supports they need to just survive go away. So what can we do at the neighborhood scale to help react to power? Well, part of it kind of comes to this energy efficiency question. There is technology, there is kind of science. I mean, Nick and I and Pravin come from School of Architecture, so we oftentimes default to the building. But it is possible to retrofit a house in a way that it is livable without power, meaning that it won't be comfortable, but it would be in the wintertime, no matter how cold it gets, it really wouldn't drop much below 60. And in the summer, it wouldn't get much, kind of hotter than 70. Yes?
One of the things I had written down that would be an effect for people with more snow and problems like that would be the ice dams that we've been experiencing lately. Is that something that an internal retrofit system can help with?
Yeah, good one. So those are the kinds of things. I mean, this is a really extreme example. If we were to retrofit every house in Cleveland to this degree, we don't have that much money. Nobody has that much money. But could we identify kind of vulnerable populations? Could we use Kresge dollars to do a test of this kind of thing, or spread the dollars around and focus on that ice dam question? Because I mean, I think that if your house is anything like mine, the icicles went all the way down to the sidewalk. It does a lot of damage, and you end up having to pay for it later. So part of it, I think, at the first meeting is to put as many ideas out on the table as possible about things people would like to see happen in their neighborhoods. And then the next phase is thinking about what are the things that'll be the best for each neighborhood, because $200,000 sounds like a lot until you spend it, So like if we could only do some of these things in each of the neighborhoods, kind of which of those things are going to matter the most to the people that you're working with. Oh, and by the way, of course, there are lots of resources. Arlen, I'm looking at you. I mean, Environmental Health Watch has been looking at these kinds of questions for a really long time. So we don't have to guess here. I think that what we do is we, have this kind of conversation, see what people are interested in, and then we go to the experts and we figure out kind of what the right program, what the right investment would be. Okay, so another challenge from climate variability, climate change, is reduced access to food, as Nick talked about. I mean, as things get weirder in California, our food supply, could be pretty significantly impacted. And so the ways that, kind of post-disaster we've responded to food shortages is this way. We send relief from other parts of the country. But if the whole country is going to be grappling with different kinds of food shortages, what do we, kind of how do we respond? So it's a combination of kind of this long-term change that's going to affect the cost of food throughout the country and around the planet, but also the power outages that may reduce access, so food won't be able to get to where it needs to be. And then, kind of especially challenging for people who are elderly, have any kind of medical condition. So at the neighborhood scale, what are some things we can do? So I've been just kind of plucking examples from elsewhere in the country just as a food for thought as we begin to think about this. This is a program that kind of came to life after Hurricane Sandy, where people couldn't get food. So an organization, a really ad hoc group, put together this Hurricane Sandy bicycle relief program. And basically it was bicycles, baskets and trailers were supplied because you couldn't get through some roads. And so bicycles, even though that doesn't look comfortable, it was one way of getting food to some of the parts of the city that were most in need. And also this guy is representing the kind of bicycle repair kind of people who were traveling around helping people, helping bicyclists in need. So this wasn't an expensive program, but it was a program that was really helpful at a point in time where the city was facing crisis. Here's an adaptation strategy we already have underway in Cleveland. Unless things get really bad, we're going to have plenty of lettuce. The Cleveland Foundation greenhouse. Basil lettuce, we're good. But also the community gardens, I mean, whenever we do community gardens, people always, kind of raise the fact that, yeah, that's fine in the summer, but what about people who experience food insecurity other times of the year? But I think, kind of a lot of programs, Ohio State Extension and others, show us how we can extend the produce of our very short growing season. So that people can, can or make sauces or freeze things. So it's just another way. I don't think the community gardens are ever going to replace the kind of big food system that feeds us all, but it is a way to provide calories in times of need. Another challenge, almost everything related to kind of environmental remediation in terms of pollution gets worse in the aftermath of climate change. So one of the things that we've struggled with here in Northeast Ohio for a long time is that, older houses kind of produce mold, and mold can be really bad for the elderly and for babies. And so as the weather gets, kind of more unpredictable, we may see increases. This photo, fortunately, is of Detroit. No, it's not fortunate, but I mean, it's like things are bad in Cleveland, but this really, really bad house. This is pretty dramatic. This was in Detroit. What are the things we can do? I mean, the Healthy Homes Initiative, is one way of being able to, kind of provide both knowledge and also resources to help people, both clean it up when these things happen, because sometimes it isn't until there's a home inspection or something that even these kinds of conditions are revealed, but also prevent it from happening in the first place. So what are the ways we can retrofit houses to keep that air quality better? Because mold is, it's bad. We have a lot of kids in this city who have asthma, and we need to be sort of thinking about that. Flash floods, just another example of a challenge, right? It creates these dangerous road conditions, reduced mobility. There's all kinds of health impacts if you have water standing around for too long. It damages our roads, it damages bridges, and ultimately it pollutes our streams and rivers and pollutes Lake Erie. So these are some examples from Philadelphia, are things that can help. I mean, in the event of a really bad flood, some of these Green Street adaptations aren't going to help that much. When you get floods like this, these things help a little bit. Mostly these help on a day-to-day storm rather than those big gushers. But any things that we can do, and so the city and the sewer district have been doing more of these Green Street projects, so that may emerge as a priority for some of your neighborhoods. There's already a Green Street project underway, I'm sure you know, in Slavic Village on Fleet Avenue. Green parks, this is also from Philadelphia. It seems redundant, right? Most parks are green, but there are ways that we can kind of add features to our parks to help manage stormwater, to help absorb rain, so that in the event of some of these big storms, we get less of that kind of dramatic flooding, both for our streets and also for people's houses. Of course, flooding ties to mold. Once you get it in your basement, it becomes a problem. Philadelphia also has been doing a bunch of green school projects, and so as we invest in our school system, in our neighborhood schools, are there ways that we can also use the schools as an anchor, as a resource for adaptation? And I just include this picture because it shows that even though sometimes it seems like a lot of these things happen in a top-down way, in Philadelphia, the transformation of the different school properties was actually done this way, with a community workshop where people talked about what they wanted to see. And so we hope some of that will come out of this process as well. When we have these conversations with our community, with our neighborhoods, we'll all be there recording the information people provide and then producing some imagery around it. So you said you wanted, kind of this to happen in your neighborhood, kind of producing some of those images to help build consensus around what could be. Same drawing. But it is this kind of idea, the more kind of green places we have in the neighborhoods, it can reduce heat, it can allow for stormwater absorption. The reason that this Kresge grant is tied to vacant land is because we got a lot of it. We tend to think about vacant land as a liability, because it is. I mean, when you've got that much. This is an exaggerated map, I must point out. Neocandu considers a probable vacant lot to be any lot that probably doesn't have a building on it. So this also includes parks, it includes parking lots. This one's a little more accurate. This one is just the city of Cleveland, and it shows actual vacant lots, the ones that used to have a building on it. The building is now gone. And then these are in the land bank. So when we talk about assets, about half of the vacant properties in the city of Cleveland are in the public domain, which means that this is a tool for us as we begin to think about how we, kind of look at adaptation in the city neighborhoods. But again, it varies, right? I mean, Detroit Shore, where you're going to see, kind of fewer vacant properties to work with. Slavic Village, maybe some more. It's going to be different from neighborhood to neighborhood. Here's a rather dramatic example of what one community has been doing. I had to go all the way to Copenhagen to find it, but on the internet anyway, not in person. Copenhagen, of course, city below sea level in a lot of areas, and so how they've been doing with flash floods, they've created this whole plan around reducing flash flooding at the neighborhood scale. And so they haven't implemented yet, so all I have are the pretty pictures. But it's about green spaces that in a normal day, is a green park that you can use, and in a rainy day it becomes a reservoir to be able to absorb that water and keep it out of people's houses and keep it out of the streets. Here's another example at the street level. On a normal day or on a small rainy day, you have a green median. On the heavy rain days, the water is held in the middle of the street, so traffic continues to move. Heat waves. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit. There are all kinds of impacts. The worst, of course, being that people experience extreme stress and some people die. But there are smaller impacts as well that are, more widespread. Heat exhaustion, heat stroke, more problems breathing, aggravated asthma. So these kinds of challenges related to heat. Here's an example, again from Philadelphia, of a programmatic response. So this isn't about something we do physically in the neighborhood, but could we create a system? And the county health department and the city health department have been working on these kinds of things. But announcements on the media, it's really hot, here are some things you can do to protect yourself. These buddy systems where neighbors are looking out for neighbors. Philadelphia operates a heat line during the worst heat days so that you can call with your questions, your concerns, and home visits are then triggered by those heat lines. So if people, if the heat line gets a call from somebody who's clearly in distress, a care provider can come out and check on that person. Making sure that we're not shutting off power during the hottest times because, that could create huge problems problems, and making sure that we have increased medical personnel, especially protecting seniors and the homeless during these kinds of events. Here's another response to heat waves. This is the tree plan for Baltimore. You should probably know that City of Cleveland's also working on a tree plan. Restoring the urban forest is one way to help buffer neighborhoods from heat. As Nick's maps show, neighborhoods with more trees have overall cooler temperatures. And it's important that you recognize that these kind of adaptations usually don't just do one thing. So trees protect us from heat, but they also improve air quality. They reduce energy costs. And so thinking about the ways that whatever we do in our neighborhoods can have more than one benefit. I love this quote: "The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. Next best time is today." Gives you something to do this afternoon. But trees are also, kind of potentially challenging. In big storms, they fall on our houses, they fall on our cars, they block roads and such. So this is a Portland program where neighborhood residents were trained as tree stewards. Not to say we're going to put people 40 feet up in a tree doing tree trimming, but at least to kind of keep an eye on the forest in their neighborhoods, to see the trees that look like they've got big dead limbs that could potentially be problematic, alerting the city to those kinds of things so that we can kind of keep the overall, kind of urban forest in better health. Reduces those problems away. When we talked about this a little bit already, but it's the warmer, icier winters. Even though we're getting more snow, we're also getting more ice storms than I've ever experienced before. And there's the problems with that. For people with limited mobility, these streets are impossible. But even for people who are just trying to walk, drive, take transit in their neighborhoods, these kinds of conditions are pretty bad. In addition to the dangerous road conditions and the personal injuries, I broke my arm last year. We also experience, if the winters are warmer, fewer pest die-offs. I mean, winter is a great time for killing, mosquitoes and such. And if the winter isn't getting cold enough, then we're going to have more of those insects, those pests in the summer. And so all of those insect-borne diseases will be worse in the summer. So this is just an example from Boston, the Snow Crew. Essentially, it's an online program where you can help your neighbors. So again, kind of speaking at it not just from the physical side, but what are the programs we could put in place. One of my neighbors has multiple sclerosis, and if you've ever seen someone with limited mobility try to walk down the street in the winter, it kind of it makes you shovel your sidewalk, And so are there ways, because we recognize that we have disabled and elderly residents in our midst, that we can kind of join forces to kind of protect each other. Here's one in Ann Arbor where they get a lot of snow. The neighbors got together and bought a snowplow. So it enables, kind of get all the sidewalks clear so people can get around. So that's a really kind of quick overview. Again, not meant to be comprehensive. I'm sure you all can think of other, kinds of things. But what we were hoping that we could do is sort of move you all into the four corners of the room to have an initial conversation about the kinds of things that you might want to see happening in your own neighborhoods. This is a way of sort of doing a test run of the conversations you'll be having with your neighbors next month when we do the community workshops. So if we could do Slavic Village up here in this corner where Nick is, and let's put Detroit Shoreway across the table. Is this too hard? I mean, it's good to move around. We only have about 15 minutes left together. Slavic Village will be over there, Detroit Shoreway in the back corner, and Glenville, thank you. Glenville is over here. One of us will join each session so we can. Oh, one last point. In your packet, there are 4 questions. So rather than just, you can talk about whatever you like, but there's some leading questions here. In the right-hand pocket, it looks like this. So there are 4 questions that you can use to kind of help your conversation. And maybe we'll take about 10 minutes just to have this conversation. We'll come back together and talk about next steps, and then we'll let you go for the day.